The heart chamber was designed to amplify psychic resonance, and standing in it felt like standing inside a living crystal that could see into your soul. Elias Kane stood at the chamber's center, acutely aware of the hundreds of witnesses filling the observation galleries above. Dravari nobles whose skin showed shifting colors that betrayed their emotions, alien dignitaries from a dozen species, and human observers who'd come specifically to document what they assumed would be another death. Queen Zythara stood across from him, separated by maybe 3 meters of space that felt like kilometers. She was taller than most Dravari, and they were already tall by human standards. She had to be close to 7 feet. Her skin had the characteristic iridescence of her species, colors shifting beneath the surface in patterns that Elias' research had taught him, indicated complex emotion. Right now, she was showing confusion mixed with resignation mixed with something that might have been hope carefully suppressed. Her eyes were the deep amber of old gold, and they held the weight of someone who'd seen too much death. Her ears tapered to elegant points through dark hair that fell past her shoulders, and her presence in the chamber felt like gravity. You were aware of her pulling at you even when she wasn't moving. "Final chance to withdraw, human," she said, her voice carrying easily across the space despite not being raised. "You've seen the records. You know what happens in this chamber. 17 consorts have died during the bonding ritual. Warriors, psychics, enhanced beings with mental disciplines your species hasn't even developed yet. All dead." Elias didn't respond. He simply held her gaze with the same calm determination he'd shown when volunteering 3 days ago. Zythara's skin flashed with irritation, sharp reds and oranges that Elias recognized as anger mixed with concern. "You don't even speak. No grand declarations of confidence, no boasts about hidden strength. You just stand there. Do you have any idea what you've committed to?" Elias nodded once. He understood perfectly. He'd spent the last 3 days researching every detail of the bonding ritual, every documented death, every theory about why Queen Zythara's consorts couldn't survive her presence. The prevailing theory was simple. She was too powerful. Her psychic abilities exceeded anything her species typically produced, and the bonding ritual required complete mental merger. When her consciousness crashed into someone of insufficient strength, it was like a tsunami hitting a sandcastle. Immediate, catastrophic, fatal. "Then why?" Zythara demanded, and there was genuine pain in her voice now. "Why volunteer when you know you'll die? What does a human xenoanthropologist gain from meaningless suicide?" Elias didn't answer. Words wouldn't convince her. He'd have to show her. He stepped forward to the ritual stone, a crystalline formation in the chamber's center that hummed with barely audible frequencies, placed his hand on its surface. The traditional gesture, "I accept the risk. I choose this path. I will not withdraw." Zythara stared at him for a long moment, her skin cycling through colors that suggested she was cycling through a dozen emotions too quickly to name. Finally, she moved to the stone herself, placing her hand beside his. "Your death will haunt me like all the others," she said quietly. "But if you're determined to throw your life away, I'll honor your choice." She nodded to the ritual attendants, priests in silver robes who'd performed this ceremony 17 times and prepared funeral rites 17 times. They began the chant, low harmonics that made the chamber resonate. Zythara took Elias' other hand. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. "When the merging begins, there will be pain," she told him. "Resist it as long as you can. The longer you last, the less traumatic your death will be." Elias squeezed her hand gently, reassurance he couldn't voice. Then the priests touched the ritual stone, and the bonding began. The psychic pressure hit Elias like a physical force. Zythara's consciousness crashed into his mind with the weight of a collapsing star, testing, probing, searching for the mental resilience needed to withstand complete merger. Elias felt his thoughts scrambling, his sense of self fragmenting under the assault. This was the moment where most consorts broke, their minds shattering like glass under a hammer. But Elias didn't try to resist. He didn't build walls or strengthen defenses or fight the intrusion. Instead, he did what felt completely counterintuitive. He opened wider. He let his consciousness become receptive rather than resistant, accepted the pressure instead of opposing it, made his mind like water, impossible to break because there was nothing rigid to shatter. Zythara's presence flooded through him, and instead of drowning, Elias felt himself expanding to accommodate her. His sense of self stretched, became more capacious, made room for her power without being destroyed by it. He felt her shock ripple through the connection. This wasn't how it was supposed to work. Consorts were supposed to meet her strength with their own, to resist, to prove themselves through opposition. But Elias was doing the opposite, accepting, yielding, and somehow, impossibly, surviving. Zythara pushed deeper, showing him the full extent of her power. Psychic abilities that could reshape matter, disciplines that allowed her to impose her will on physical reality through mental force alone, raw power that burned through his consciousness like fire. And Elias absorbed it, not by being strong enough to withstand it, but by being flexible enough to change shape around it. His mind adapted, reformed, found equilibrium in places he didn't know existed. Then something unexpected happened. As Zythara poured her power into him, Elias felt something wake up inside himself. Not psychic power, he didn't have that, but something else. Something that felt like the universe itself paying attention to him, like reality becoming malleable around his will. He thought, I need to be stronger, and his consciousness reinforced itself without him knowing how. He thought, I want to understand her, and knowledge flowed into him directly from Zythara's mind, without her deliberately sharing it. He thought this chamber should resonate differently, and the crystal walls began producing harmonics that had never existed before. The witnesses above gasped audibly. The priest stopped chanting, staring in disbelief. Zythara's presence in his mind shifted from assault to astonishment. What are you doing? I don't know, Elias thought back and felt her experience his genuine confusion. He wasn't controlling this consciously. It was just happening, like the universe was responding to his needs, bending around his intentions, making reality accommodate his will. That's not possible, Zythara's thought came through their connection. That's not psychic power, that's something else. She searched through her species' ancient knowledge, and Elias felt her find it. Old legends about reality manipulation, about beings whose belief was so strong that existence itself conformed to their expectations. Stories the Dravari had dismissed as myth because psychic power was real and measurable, while reality manipulation was supposedly fantasy. Except it wasn't fantasy. Elias was doing it right now without training or conscious control, and the power was growing stronger as the ritual deepened. Zythara's consciousness wrapped around his more carefully now, not testing his strength but exploring this new phenomenon. She showed him her memories, 20 years of ruling alone, 17 deaths that haunted her, the loneliness of power so great it killed anyone who got close, the desperate hope that maybe, somehow, someone would survive her. Elias shared his own memories in return. Years of wandering because nowhere felt like home. The sense of being fundamentally different in ways he couldn't articulate. The peace he'd found in accepting impossibilities rather than trying to control them. And the recognition when he'd seen her. Someone else who's too much for anyone to handle. Someone else who's desperately lonely despite being surrounded by people. Their minds merged deeper, past surface thoughts into core identity. Elias felt Zythara's intellect, brilliant and strategic, always 3 steps ahead. She felt his openness, willing to see beauty in things that terrified others. He felt her strength, carrying the weight of an entire civilization. She felt his flexibility, adapting to circumstances that would break most people. And in the merging, something unprecedented formed. Balance. Her psychic power flowing into his reality manipulation. His acceptance creating space for her strength. 2 impossible abilities that shouldn't complement each other but did, creating equilibrium where there should have been destruction. The chamber's crystals blazed with light, resonating at frequencies that made the witnesses cover their ears. Energy poured off Elias and Zythara in visible waves, psychic force mixed with something else, something reality itself seemed to be participating in. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2 hours. The priests were openly weeping now, though Elias didn't know if it was joy or fear. The witnesses stood transfixed, watching something that had never happened before. A consort surviving beyond the first terrible minutes. Inside the bond, Elias and Zythara were no longer separate consciousnesses testing each other. They were becoming something new, not merged into one being, but two beings functioning as a unified system, each maintaining individual identity while being fundamentally interconnected. Elias felt Zythara's loneliness ending, felt her hope blooming into something that might become love. She felt his recognition. Yes, this is what I've been searching for, and his determination that he would not let her power destroy him because she'd already destroyed too many and she didn't deserve more guilt. The ritual approached completion. The final stage required complete acceptance, both parties choosing the bond consciously, with full understanding of what it meant. This is permanent, Zythara sent through their connection. If we complete this, we'll be connected for life. You'll never be fully alone in your own head again. Are you certain? Elias didn't answer with thoughts. He answered with feeling, absolute certainty, relief, joy at finally being understood. Willingness to share existence with someone who comprehended what it meant to be lonely despite, or because of being extraordinary. Zythara sent back her own confirmation, gratitude, wonder, fear that she would somehow still hurt him despite everything. And underneath it all, the tentative beginning of love for someone who'd seen her at her most dangerous and chosen her anyway. The ritual completed in a flash of light so bright that the witnesses had to look away. When the light faded, Elias and Zythara stood still connected, foreheads touching, hands clasped. Both were trembling with exhaustion, but they were alive. Both of them, the first successful bonding in 20 years. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Then someone began to cheer, a human observer, tears streaming down her face. The sound spread, building until the entire chamber rang with celebration and disbelief. Elias and Zythara finally separated physically, though the psychic connection remained, a constant presence in the back of both their minds, comfortable and right. Zythara stared at him with wonder written across her features and blazing through their bond. "You survived," she said, voice rough with emotion. "You actually survived." Elias smiled, the first expression most witnesses had seen him make. Through their bond, he sent, "I told you I would." "Well, I didn't tell you with words, but I told you with actions." Zythara laughed, the sound containing hysteria and relief in equal measure. Out loud, she said, "Why didn't you speak? Why volunteer in silence?" Elias finally spoke aloud for the first time since volunteering, his voice quiet but carrying in the chamber's acoustics. "Because you were lonely. And so was I. And I thought maybe two impossibly strong people, who destroyed everyone who got close, might be exactly what each other needed." The witnesses heard it, but Zythara heard something deeper through their bond. He'd seen her. Not the queen with her terrifying power, not the warrior whose strength killed, but the person underneath, lonely, desperate for connection, carrying guilt for deaths that weren't her fault but that she couldn't help causing. He'd seen that, and he'd volunteered knowing she would see him in return, knowing she would understand his own loneliness, his own sense of being too different to belong anywhere. They'd chosen each other based on recognition of kindred spirits, not political calculation or strategic alliance. Through their bond, Zythara sent emotions too complex for words. Gratitude, wonder, the terrifying vulnerability of being truly known, and underneath it all, love beginning to grow. Elias sent back acceptance, peace, joy at finally finding someone who understood, and his own tentative love taking root. They stood together in the heart chamber as witnesses celebrated around them, and through their bond they were aware of each other in ways that transcended physical presence. The ritual was complete. The bonding was successful. Now they had to figure out what came next. The royal chambers were quieter than the heart chamber, but no less overwhelming. Elias sat on a bench that adjusted to his height. Dravari furniture was designed for their taller frames, and tried to process the enormity of what had just happened. He could feel Zythara in his mind. Not invasively, not overwhelming his thoughts, but present. A warm awareness at the edge of his consciousness, her emotions and surface thoughts accessible if he reached for them, his own equally available to her. It was intimate beyond anything he'd experienced, more intimate than any physical contact could be, because there was no hiding, no performance, just truth, constantly visible. Zythara entered from the adjoining room, having changed from ritual robes to something more comfortable, simple tunic and pants that looked remarkably human in style. She sat beside him, careful to leave space despite their mental connection. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Overwhelmed, but okay." Elias paused. "You." "Terrified," she admitted. "For 20 years, everyone I bonded with died. Now you've survived, and I'm afraid I'll somehow still destroy you. That this is temporary success before inevitable tragedy." Through their bond, Elias felt the depth of her fear. Guilt compounded over 17 deaths. Self-loathing for power she couldn't control, desperate hope warring with expectation of loss. He reached out and took her hand, sent reassurance through their connection. "I'm not going anywhere. You can't destroy me because I'm not rigid enough to break. Remember." "How did you do that?" Zythara asked. "The reality manipulation. Humans aren't supposed to have that ability." "I didn't know I had it until it happened," Elias admitted. "But thinking about it now, maybe it makes sense. I've spent 5 years traveling to impossible places, accepting realities that defy human understanding. Maybe my mind got used to believing that impossible things are possible, and when I needed it, that belief became actual. You bent reality through pure will and conviction." Zythara's skin showed colors that indicated intellectual fascination mixed with concern. "Do you understand how dangerous that is? How much damage you could cause if you learn to control it consciously?" "About as dangerous as psychic power strong enough to shatter minds," Elias suggested gently. She flinched, but through their bond she felt his point. They were both dangerous, both carrying power that could destroy. The question wasn't whether they were dangerous, it was whether they'd choose to be careful with each other. "I want to show you something," Zythara said. She closed her eyes, and through their bond, Elias felt her consciousness shift. Suddenly he was experiencing her memory. A younger Zythara, newly crowned, excited to undergo the bonding ritual with her first chosen consort. Confidence that her strength would be matched. Then the terrible moment when his mind shattered against hers, his consciousness fragmenting and dissolving while she watched helplessly. The memory shifted, 17 different deaths, each one burning itself into her psyche. Different faces, different circumstances, same terrible ending. And after each one, the growing certainty that she would always be alone, that her power made her fundamentally incompatible with connection. Elias pulled gently out of the memory and squeezed her hand. Through their bond, he shared his own memories. Childhood isolation, never quite fitting with other children. Teenage years recognizing he thought differently than his peers. Adult life wandering because nowhere felt like home, everyone feeling distant even when physically close. Different circumstances, same fundamental loneliness. "We match," Elias sent through their bond. "Not because we're the same, but because we're both impossible in ways that complement each other." "You sound very certain," Zythara said, but he felt hope beginning to overcome her fear. "I am certain. Want to know why?" "Why?" "Because when I volunteered, I didn't think about whether I'd survive. I just knew that you were lonely, and I was lonely, and maybe that was enough reason to try." Zythara was quiet for a long moment, her skin showing colors Elias was learning to interpret. Wonder mixed with vulnerability, mixed with the tentative beginning of genuine joy. "What happens now?" she asked. "We're bonded permanently. You're technically my consort, which means you have political status you never asked for. My advisors will want to use your reality manipulation for strategic advantage. Other species will see you as either threat or opportunity, and she gestured between them, we barely know each other outside of the psychic connection. Then we learn, Elias said simply. We figure it out together. You make it sound easy. It won't be easy, but it'll be easier than being alone. The next morning brought political reality crashing back. Zythara's advisors demanded audience, and Elias found himself in a council chamber surrounded by Dravari nobles, whose skin showed colors ranging from curious to hostile. Queen Zythara, began Lord Varath, whose deep purple skin suggested suspicion, we must discuss the implications of your successful bonding. Discuss, Zythara said, her tone making clear she wasn't asking permission. The human possesses reality manipulation, a power we've never encountered before. How do we know he won't use it against Dravari interests? Before Zythara could respond, Elias felt her anger spike through their bond. She was about to defend him, possibly violently. He sent calming through their connection and spoke aloud for the first time in the council chamber. You don't know. You'll have to trust me. The nobles stared. Most had assumed he was mute. Trust? Varath's skin flashed angry red. Trust a human who could reshape reality on a whim. You trust your queen who could shatter your minds on a whim, Elias pointed out. Same principle. Power requires trust. I'm choosing not to abuse mine. You'll either believe that or you won't. Through their bond, Elias felt Zythara's pride in him mixing with her continuing anger at the council's suspicion. The human makes a valid point, said Lady Merkella, whose skin showed thoughtful amber. We've accepted our queen's power because she's proven her intentions through action. Perhaps we should extend the same courtesy to her consort. The meeting continued for hours, covering everything from political implications to security protocols to whether Elias' reality manipulation could be tested and controlled. Through it all, Elias remained mostly quiet, letting Zythara handle politics while he observed. But through their bond, they communicated constantly, her checking if he was overwhelmed, him reassuring her he could handle it, both of them sharing observations and strategy in ways that no one else could detect. Finally, the council adjourned with cautious acceptance. Elias would remain as consort, his powers would be studied with his consent, and they would proceed carefully with revealing this development to other species. When they were alone again, Zythara collapsed onto a bench with theatrical exhaustion. Welcome to royal life, meetings that last forever and accomplish very little. I noticed, Elias sat beside her, do you do this every day? Usually twice a day, sometimes 3 times if there's a crisis. That sounds terrible. It is terrible. Through their bond, Zythara sent amusement, but it's my duty, our duty now technically. Your consort, which means you have political standing whether you want it or not. I definitely don't want it, Elias said. I became a xenoanthropologist specifically to avoid politics. Too bad. You volunteered for this when you put your hand on the ritual stone. I volunteered to bond with you. The politics are an unfortunate side effect. Zythara laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. Through their bond, Elias felt her joy, simple pleasure in his company, relief at having someone who saw royal duty as burden rather than privilege. They spent the afternoon together, Zythara showing Elias around the royal compound. She was different here, away from the council, more relaxed, more willing to show vulnerability. She made jokes about pompous nobles, complained about bureaucratic inefficiency, and generally acted less like an intimidating queen and more like a person who happened to have an overwhelming job. Elias found himself falling in love with her, not because of the psychic bond that created connection but not affection. No, he was falling in love with Zythara the person. Brilliant and exhausted, powerful and lonely, carrying responsibility that would have crushed most people, but doing it anyway because someone had to. Through their bond, he felt her falling for him too. appreciating his calm acceptance of impossibilities, his willingness to just exist beside her without needing constant engagement, his humor that he expressed through feelings rather than words more often than not. That evening, as they shared dinner in Zythara's private chambers, she asked the question that had been building. Why don't you speak more? You can talk, you've proven that, but you use words sparingly. Elias considered how to explain. Finally, he sent through their bond. Words often obscure more than they reveal. People say things they don't mean, or mean things they don't say. I spent years being misunderstood despite speaking clearly. So I started speaking less, communicating through actions instead. It's more honest. And now you have someone who can sense your meaning directly through psychic bond, Zythara observed. That must be a relief. It's incredible, Elias sent, emotion flooding through their connection. You're incredible. Zythara's skin blazed with colors that indicated joy mixed with something deeper. She reached across the table and took his hand. I want to try something, she said. A technique for bonded pairs. It requires deep connection, more than we've attempted so far. I trust you. They moved to a more comfortable seating area, Zythara guiding them into a position where they sat facing each other, knees touching, hands clasped. Open your mind completely, she instructed. No barriers at all. Let me in as deep as possible. Elias did. And suddenly he wasn't just sensing Zythara's surface thoughts. He was experiencing her consciousness fully, understanding not just what she thought but how she thought, the patterns of her mind, the fundamental structure of her being. She was experiencing him the same way, and through their connection he felt her wonder. His mind was nothing like hers. Where she was structured and strategic, he was fluid and adaptive. Where she imposed order, he found harmony. Different architectures of consciousness that somehow fit together perfectly. You're beautiful, Zythara whispered aloud. Your mind is so different from anything I've known. So open and accepting and flexible. It's beautiful. Elias sent back. So are you. Your strength isn't just power, it's dedication. You carry so much weight, and you do it with such care. They stayed connected like that for hours, learning each other's mental landscapes, discovering the ways their consciousnesses complemented and supported each other. When they finally separated physically, the mental connection remaining, both were exhausted and overwhelmed and happier than either had been in years. I love you, Zythara said simply. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other in conventional ways, but through the bond I know your heart. And I love you. I love you too, Elias said aloud, words feeling right for this moment. I loved you before the bonding, actually, when I saw you and recognized the loneliness. You volunteered for certain death because you loved me. Zythara's skin showed shock. I volunteered because you needed someone to survive you. And I thought maybe I could. Love was a bonus. She pulled him close, and they sat together in the quiet of the royal chambers. Two impossible people who'd found each other through a ritual that should have killed one of them, but instead created something unprecedented. Genuine partnership between beings who'd thought they'd always be alone. Outside, the planet of Vorn continued its political machinations. Other species debated the implications of human reality manipulation. Nobles schemed about how to use or limit the new consort's power. But inside the royal chambers, Elias and Zythara were simply two people in love, learning what it meant to be fully known and fully accepted despite, or because of, their extraordinary natures. The bonding ritual had saved them both, but love was what would sustain them. And in the days and weeks that followed, as they navigated politics and power and the complications of being the most unusual couple in known space, they would lean on that love constantly. Because sometimes, the greatest power isn't psychic force or reality manipulation. Sometimes, the greatest power is choosing to be vulnerable with someone who could hurt you, but chooses not to. And that's the power Elias and Zythara built together. The power of trust, the power of acceptance, and the power of two lonely people deciding that being together was worth every risk and complication. No one had dared to be the alien woman's husband because everyone saw the deaths and assumed the problem was insufficient strength. But Elias understood. The problem was meeting power with resistance instead of acceptance. And in choosing acceptance over resistance, he didn't just survive. He thrived, and helped Zythara thrive alongside him. Their legend spread. The queen who killed everyone who got close, and the silent human who survived by being